the visiting Atlanta Hawks, 123 to 106. Before we go ahead and jump into our main talking points and deep dive into critiquing the game itself, Tony, you want to go ahead and give us a quick rundown on our stats from the night?
Yeah, Zion Williamson had 25 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists on 9 of 16 shooting. Brandon Ingram had 16 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists on 6 of 10. Herb Jones chipped in 13 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist on 6 of 13. Jonas Valanciunas had 6 points and 7 rebounds. CJ McCollum had 13 points on 5 of 12 from the field. And Jordan Hawkins had 15 points on 4 of 8 from 3, 5-11 from the field.
Great, thanks, Tony. I think going ahead and kind of starting off there, right, with some of those leading stats is first, big news is it looks like we had Bi return to the lineup tonight after dealing with that knee tendonitis, causing him to miss the last couple games. So, in terms of having Bi back in the rotation, Tony, what did you see out there? What did you think were some of the things that the team may have, used his return as an advantageous, situation, and what were some of the items or areas that caused this team to maybe have some hiccups with his return?
Yeah, definitely. I think anytime that you get Bi back into the lineup, it's going to be a good thing, and I think we all saw that early on. It seemed like Bi was confident in how he was moving and how he was taking his shots, and came out strong with 7 points to begin the game. And I think he really tried to be aggressive while coming off of that injury. But in turn, I think that makes the offense get a little out of rhythm just because they're trying to integrate someone back into the lineup. Zion as well, since he missed last game due to rest. But I like what I saw from the beginning, but it kind of, as the game went on, it seemed kind of, a little jumbled there for a while.
Yeah, that aligns with a lot of what I had seen and what I took from the game. One area that I think Brandon does need to do a better job of in terms of especially when these games start and they do kind of have a star-studded matchup from the opposing team, such as Dejounte Murray and Trey Young. This is a group of guys that we've struggled with for the last year or so, ever since they got together as a tandem. But whenever he's got a big matchup in terms of other elite players coming in to play against him and Zion, I think Brandon needs to do a better job of incorporating Zion early. Obviously, Brandon, like you said, did a good job of coming off that injury, being aggressive early, and looking to work his way back in quickly, and then hopefully kind of stem that production outwards to his other teammates and start getting them some looks and some open shots. But one thing that I think we've learned from Zion and the way that he really likes to work himself into a game is the best version of Zion is one that's involved early. Not necessarily in terms of getting shots, but getting him touches, right? I think Brandon needs to understand that ultimately through a 48-minute game, for him to not only maximize his own offensive abilities, but to get the most out of them two as a pair, he's really got to empower Zion early. I do recall, in that Grizzlies game that, that was one takeaway that it seemed like those two were doing a really good job of, truly playing together. They were playing within a system and operating in similar spaces and using each one of their, areas of strength together to get themselves open shots. Whereas the last, two games that the both of them have been on the floor, it has kind of seemed like it has felt like a little bit more of that your turn, my turn type of mentality, which was something that got these guys, in trouble in the past, as well as makes it more difficult for those, other teammates to play off of them as they're just kind of standing and watching instead of playing in rhythm and working themselves around the arc. So that is one area that I would like to see Brandon improve here in the next coming games or so, especially based off a lot of the feedback that not only himself and Zion have been giving, but head coach Willie Green, right? There's been a lot of talk around New Orleans that they see themselves as one of the top, duos in the league, if not the top duo in the league in terms of, their abilities on the floor and the talents that each one of them possess. But that's something that starts with them, and ultimately it's their responsibility and burden on a night to night basis that if they're not bringing the best version of themselves as a tandem, it's going to be tough for this team to win games, and that's how it is with a lot of teams around the league, right? You look around the league and you see tandems such as LeBron and AD, Kyrie and Luca, Jokic and Murray, now Giannis and Dame. Obviously, each one of those teams has a great supporting cast around them, but ultimately it comes down to the performances of those tandems of guys and what they can bring on a night to night basis. So um, it's one thing to certainly think that they are one of the best duos in the league. It's another thing to outwardly say that in the media and bring that responsibility upon themselves. So at this point, it's a little bit of that put up or shut up. They need to bring it on a night to night basis. As Willie said, they need to be dominant. They need to control the game, and they have to take that upon themselves as we move through the next couple games or so, and certainly grow in that area.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with some of the points that you pointed out, and it does kind of seem like Zion and Brandon are kind of having this issue to begin games because it kind of seems like Zion will take a first quarter and not really even look at the rim, and then when he comes in for that second rotation in that second quarter, he kind of then will start to pick things up, look at the rim, attack his defenders, and try to start scoring. So like you said, Brandon being that leader of the team, he should kind of know. Let's get these others involved as well as himself, because I mean, he started off really good, but then once he knew he probably took the first couple shots of the game, let's get it to Zion, see what coverage they're in defending him, and kind of go from there and kind of see how that all works.
Right. When thinking about that and digesting that, by no means do I want to put you on the spot here, but putting on your coaching cap, right, from an X and O standpoint, where are some of the areas that you think this staff could do a better job of, like you said, ensuring that these two are able to get off to hot starts and are able to work themselves into a rhythm, and the sooner that they're able to be engaged as a tandem, right, that's the sooner that those other guys are going to be getting open looks. That's sooner that CJ's able to play off ball, where we think he's the best suited at this point of his career. What would you change on a night to night basis? Is that more in terms of, is that having, two or three scheduled, play calls to essentially, align yourself with the first three possessions of the game? Is that more, a mindset? Is that schematically? I mean, what do you think are areas that need to be changed or could at least assist, giving this group a little bit of a push early in games?
Yeah, I mean, I always think it's always good for an offense of any team in this league to just see how a team is going to be guarding them, pick and roll wise. And so if you just start the game off with a simple either Zion has the ball or Brandon has the ball, I think getting either of those two guys in the middle of the floor or on the elbow and kind of see how these teams react to that. I mean, I think that'll kind of show you what their, scheme is going to be going throughout the game. Yeah, that can obviously change, but like you were saying in that Memphis game, it kind of seemed more of like a together system, and they were kind of looking for each other, and it wasn't just here you take the shot, I take the
Mm-hmm.
shot here and there, and then like we saw tonight, it's like Brandon would give it to Zion in the middle of the floor, and then just basically just get out of his way,
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa. So I think anytime that you can get those two involved to start the game, and you actually use the screen, like you were saying earlier, when was the last time we saw like Bi just dump it down to Zion off of that pick and roll from like a dive or anything like that? So I think just seeing any plays schematically like that, just to kind of see how they read and react towards those defenses, will be able to get them to start games out. I think a little hotter and at least get both of them touching the ball and moving.
Yeah, that's great. That's great insight there, and appreciate you bringing that opinion forth and sharing that with the group. Segueing off of Brandon and Zion, I think ultimately that's going to be a driving force, right? Every night that we're going to be checking, those two will be driving the success of this team. But I think at this point we've had a large enough sample size, and it's becoming pretty evident the struggles that this team is having rebounding the basketball. Um, you know as well as anybody else that I voiced my concerns and displeasures with the team's rebounding and more specifically the production coming from that five spot from JV and Larry. But I wanted to go ahead and dive a little bit deeper in there and hopefully give everybody the opportunity to really take a deeper look in this and see you know what are we seeing on a night to night basis that is hindering this team from being able to rebound, and how does that bleed over in terms of not only bleeding over to the offensive side of the ball, but almost becoming a toxic, you know, situation that is bleeding over in terms of these guys not being able to have the confidence on possession to possession that they're able to close these things out and ultimately really affecting this group as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, once again tonight, the rebounding numbers was 52 to 35. The Hawks had 19 offensive rebounds to our 9, so it just seems like every game we're getting out rebounded from that perspective. And then, like you were saying, it kind of does bleed over to the offense because getting out rebounded or out defended like that, it just becomes demoralizing for the whole team. And how do you expect them to then come on the other end and produce and everything like that when they know of all the struggles that have happened, possession after possession after possession, when one, your initial defense is getting the stops, but then it's time and time again where they're getting one, two, three more cracks at the basket. um, so I just think, it's been a demoralizing thing this whole year when they've looked bad in stretches, and that bleeds over to the offense. And I don't know. And you've kind of touched on it too. Like Larry kind of plays out of position, so you can't really fault him with, his size and having to be that five. So it's kind of not fair to him. But at the end of the day, if they're putting him in that position, those guys need to produce at that spot. And ultimately, that's been the biggest issue here with this team so far, because you go down the other stats and we shot it pretty well from the field. The threes weren't going in tonight, but you shoot it well from the free throw line, which we've touched on too. Which, to be a good team, got to be able to shoot free throws, and then that next facet of the game to become a better team is to end possessions with rebounds. So I don't know. It's one of those glaring things every night that I just don't know what the answer is besides something else or somebody else coming into that spot.
Right. And obviously, you don't ever want to, go ahead and speak in terms of, certainty that something will happen. But, seeing this long enough in terms of this year and last year, and I think the further we kind of get down the road of this group and watching them play, I think we're starting to get a little bit more clarity in terms of how big of a deal, um, you know, JV's deficiencies truly are on a night to night basis, right? You look at a game like Detroit where, he was very involved, right? We'll give it to him. And we gave him credit last show, giving him his props and making sure that we certainly shed some light on that. He was a really good player offensively. He did, crash the glass and at least record a high number of rebounds. But then again, we have to look at that for what it's worth, right? That's a young, very immature, inexperienced team over there in Detroit that certainly doesn't have the roster or the manpower to certainly contend with JV on that low block, and certainly the numbers were great, but I still think there's a very large disconnect between the statistical impact that's occurring on a night to night basis and the true value of what is being presented from that five spot. Um, when speaking about some of those deficiencies, let's go ahead and dive in there and take a look at and not only what those deficiencies are, but where do those deficiencies bleed into the rest of the team, and where are some of those things that truly aren't being judged for what they are, and it's really just a byproduct, right, of that poor play from JV at the five.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all can kind of see it out there. If it's a high pick and roll, and we're notorious for playing in drop coverage, and JV being that back guy, and it's kind of like on a string, or if you're kind of holding JV's hand, that's impacting everybody else who is on the perimeter. So say you got whoever in the pick and roll and JV's that next guy stepping up, then that's leaving that guy in the corner or the opposite side having to help JV's role, which then in turn, creates that person who's helping, their guy being left open, and that's how we get, those rebounds, how other teams get those long rebounds.
Right, and that's a great breakdown for those listening. That to just give them a little bit more insight in terms of what that what that can play a role in terms of having a five man that is constantly in drop coverage and is needing to be supported on a possession to possession basis. From your expertise, would you say it's safe to say that having JV in the middle of the floor and having those guys offer the level of support that they need to on a possession to possession basis, do you think that sheds a negative light in terms of their production from a defensive point of view? Do you think some of those guys are getting um, a little bit of a bad rap of being a defensive player just because of the level of help that they're having to provide and the attention they're having to take away from, those primary offensive players that they're guarding in terms of having to constantly be in early rotation and constantly having to cover large, amounts of space to get back into the play.
Yeah, I think that's definitely kind of what's been going on. Is I think a lot of these guys on the Pelicans have made good strides on the defensive end in the last couple of years of being better, having active hands, and everything like that. And when you're having to overhelp that one specific spot on the floor, of course, everybody else's defense is gonna, hinder in that. Yes, Herb is a great defender, all defensive guy, but he can't alone make up that ground, and neither can any of these other guys, because then, like I said, they get out of position every possession, which then leads to those long rebounds and second chance opportunities for these teams, which has been killing us all year.
Yeah, that's that's in line with how I feel and what I've been saying for quite a while now. I think, like you said, um, you know, from an individual perspective, I think a lot of the guys have made big improvements as defensive players, and I think not only does it affect them individually, I think it probably does not shine a very fair light on the defensive scheme in totality. I think more than likely this group is doing a better job than we're certainly seeing right in terms of results on the defensive end, and I think a lot of it stems from that. Um, not only are we seeing that issue there on the defensive end, in terms of dealing with rotations and ultimately giving up a lot of open perimeter shots, but like you said, the inability to close out rebounds and how that will certainly bleed over into the overall confidence of this group. I think those two things in conjunction with one another are certainly not a very good recipe for success moving forward, especially with a young team that's still trying to find its identity and truly having to learn to buy into these new concepts and grow as a group. So, um, we obviously understand the impact that his deficiencies are causing and bringing to this team on a night to night basis. But you know, understanding that, and knowing that, and then going out and doing something to, um, proactively fix the issue are two different things. So, kind of segueing into that, right? As this team continues to work through the year, where is your level of confidence at currently with this front office and this regime in terms of, obviously we know, um, it's been pretty well noted that still currently the team has a pretty strong, as a lot of people would call it, a war chest of assets and things that they could do to improve this roster. But where do you currently sit with, where you think this team could go and the direction that they could potentially take, at that five spot?
Yeah, like you alluded to, we have a war chest of picks and a couple younger guys who are in the back end of our rotation, and you can handpick any guy to, make a big deal to get another, movable center in this rotation. But at the end of the day, like, how quickly or how willingly would they be, able to make that trade? Because I mean, you have a guy in Jonas who's, great team guy and everything like that, and here for the team and everything. Been here for a couple years now, and seems to be a good locker room guy and a good leader. Plays every night, and you don't get that all the time. So it's like if there's a deal out there, we're more than willing to be able to get a trade. It just is this front office going to be willing to kind of pull that trigger and rip that band-aid off to ultimately boost this team into the next level.
Yeah. I mean, that's the big question, right? I mean, I don't think it's unfair to say that I would say currently constructed, and obviously with a little bit of luck, just like everybody else needs in terms of health and everything like that. This team's got a lot of really good pieces. A lot of them that I think that with the right supporting cast will fit together even better. Um, but even saying that, I think currently constructed, I think best case scenario, this team's maybe a game or two over 500 in totality. I think this is a 42, 43, 44 win team just in terms of it's too big of a hurdle to overcome every single night. Getting that level of production from that spot. I think it makes your margin of error so small when you're having to deal with those kind of things every night that I think you're just really not doing this group, justice. And like you said, it has nothing to do with JV from a personal perspective. I've only heard great things in the media and coming from the team that he's obviously been a stand-up guy and a true professional in terms of availability. Um, but I just don't think it's the right fit and certainly not at the right time, right? I think Griff and Willie and all those that have been around for a couple years, they understand that you don't get an unlimited amount of cracks or opportunities at this, right? They understand that they've got to win and they've got to win now. Um, so I think that they certainly are fully aware of it. I would be surprised if Griff and Trajan and Swin, if they aren't already on the phone right now, at least trying to see what their options are. And I think that that's something that certainly needs to be um, hopefully discovered sooner than later, just so we can truly see what this team looks like when constructed in the correct manner. But that's about all I had in terms of the five position. So after covering not only Zion and Brandon as a group, but that production from the five tonight, were there any areas that you wanted to touch on, or any other discussions that you think those listeners would really enjoy or get some um, you know information out of?
Yeah, just to kind of go back on what I was saying, just like, obviously stats aren't everything in these games. It's more about what you see on the court and everything. But when you look at us having 24 assists tonight, the turnovers being under, double digits, that's a recipe for success for this team to win games. But, it all comes down to that rebounding. And I think that just ultimately has shown everybody that we're good enough to play a couple good quarters or play these good games, field goal percentage wise, assists, turnovers, shooting well from the free throw. But at the end of the day, none of that matters if you can't end possessions, which ultimately gives those other teams more possessions to score. So I don't know. It's just rebounding, rebounding, rebounding is going to make this team be fully unlocked.
Yeah. And I know it's going to sound like, and I don't expect this to change over the next coming game. But, it's going to sound like we're beating a dead horse here, but it's exactly like you said. This team has been capable of having really good quarters and really good halves, but I think what you're seeing is with that lack of rebounding and the impact that that's having in those couple places that we outlined for everybody. You know, the margin of error is so small that it takes them having other worldly quarters and halves just to be up 8-10 points where they're playing out of their mind. They're shooting at an incredible clip. They aren't turning the ball up. They're doing everything in their power just to offset the impact that they're having by not being able to rebound. And I think what you're seeing in those quarters that everybody in halves that you're saying would qualify as bad ones is they're just kind of coming back down to earth in terms of you know their play outside of rebounding, and it's just there's such a discrepancy that they're not able to overcome how much of an impact that's having. It seems like we're seeing these bad quarters and bad halves from a numerical standpoint, right, in terms of score. But then you think back and you look back and you say, we didn't play very bad. We didn't turn the ball over. We didn't make a bunch of mistakes. We made shots. We didn't shoot 50%, 55%, but we shot in the mid 40s. We got we're doing a lot of things really well, but I think it's just you're seeing that those negative things coming from the rebounding and the impact it's having on defense are just way too large to overcome during a 12-minute span. I think that is really what you're seeing here, and that the rest of this team outside of that, although obviously room for improvement, is playing pretty solid basketball. I think it's just it takes you playing way outside your means and really your realistic expectations to offset that.
Yeah, just to kind of go off the points that you're saying, and I kind of iterated just throughout this podcast, it's kind of what I was saying. When they don't get those rebounds, it gets so demoralizing for this offense because I truly believe the best offense is when they get stops and they just go out and go. Not a lot of teams can, match up with the Zions, the BIs, the CJs, and a couple shooters on the perimeter when they're just going. We don't necessarily have the best, half court offense or a lot of sets that I've seen in particular. Yeah, we have a lot of motions that get certain people the ball, but we don't have like okay, this guy's coming off of a pin down through an elevator screen and getting a shot. Like, we don't have a lot of that. So I feel like in turn tonight, the offense didn't look as good because we didn't get those rebounds and we didn't get out and go because not a lot of teams can match up, like I said, with those three guys.
Yeah, and it's not even just playing in transition. A lot of that is that secondary transition where when we're getting that ball off the rim and guys are having to find who they're guarding in transition in space, you're getting a lot of mismatches. You're getting a lot of cross matchups where you're getting a Trey Young or DeJounte Murray matched up onto a guy like Bi instead of like DeAndre Hunter or Jalen Johnson. So for a guy like Bi, obviously that's advantageous. In terms for a guy like CJ, maybe he's getting a big somebody that's not as quick as he is, and he's able to get to his spots and get clean looks. And then obviously a guy like Zion who's going to thrive in transition and play above the rim. Obviously, anytime you can get him in space and not have two or three bodies, around him and looking at him and beating him up. Obviously, like you said, that's when these three guys and this team as a whole is going to be itself. So by not allowing them or providing them, a situation where they're rewarded for playing good defense or getting a deflection or properly rotating and contesting a three, by not being able to close that out, like you said, it's demoralizing, and you're not providing them with a situation that they can truly maximize, their talents and their strengths as a group as well as individual players.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I you saw it tonight. The times that they did get the defensive stops and just got out and go. I mean, you saw Zion get a couple dunks, Brandon a couple dunks, couple shots that the couple threes that we did make were in that semi transition, like you said. And but just to kind of go off one of those points is, I think they just did a horrible job of creating matchups that were favorable for us. And I think that's the biggest thing with this team. In a lot of games, there are going to be matchups for Zion or Bi or CJ, like you're saying, that if you can get the right switch, those people are kind of in jail at that point. And I think they just did a bad job, like I said. And I think it just trickled from not getting any stops. And then when they just went down there, it was kind of just that you take it, I take it this time. And then they were just going one on one with their defender. They weren't even getting screens or mismatches. And I think they could have done a way better job of getting Trey Young either in foul trouble or getting a bigger guy like Bi on him and just shooting over the top of him. And we saw none of that tonight.
Yeah, it seemed like kind of like what you're saying is a lot of it just negatively, just especially in that third quarter, it just really kind of got out of control really quickly, right? It's like you look up and you're up almost 10 at halftime, and the next thing you blink and it's like you're down almost 20, and it's just you look back and you think, well, where did that go wrong, right? And a lot of that came from getting an initial stop, giving up a rebound, and kicking it out for three. I mean, I'm pretty sure during that run, Atlanta hit 4 or 5 consecutive threes in a row that were wide open. I mean, the easiest shot in basketball is a 3 pointer off of an offensive rebound. I mean, that is literally the definition of a practice shot. It's just like a coach kicking it out to you and going through your warm up or your workout. You're never going to be able to recover or survive that when you're allowing that, especially to a team that has some real legitimate talent around the perimeter. So, um, I think just more the reason that we're shedding this light on the impact that this is having, and not only that, but the desperation that this front office and organization needs to have in terms of correcting this wrong and giving this team a legitimate fighting chance every single night.
Yeah, no doubt about it, and it definitely doesn't get easier. You know, the next couple games or the next couple weeks. I mean, you got the reigning MVP, Jokic, and there are other guys with that, and if you're just gonna be playing back on them, it's gonna be a long night for the Pels for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, with that, Tony, I really appreciate your insight tonight. You brought a lot of good information, and not only that, you did a really good job of painting a picture for our listeners, just so they can really see what we're seeing on a night to night basis. So I appreciate you providing that insight. Like Tony said, we got a couple big games coming up, more opportunities for this group to grow as a unit, and hopefully, fix some of these issues. Um, but until then, I appreciate everybody hopping on and joining us after tonight. Got a long road and a long season ahead of us, and you know where to find all of your most up to date and you know exciting information regarding this team. With that, thank you everybody. This has been Tony and Pat. We look forward to hearing and speaking with you guys after our next game.